and concentration of material recovered during a recent Secret Service Protective Intelligence investigation, following multiple telecommunications-related imminent threats directed towards senior U.S. government officials this spring.
The year just started, and America has already launched an investigation and uncovered a hidden kill switch that could freeze the American way of life with a single command. Right now, we are walking a red line. Our high-tech military is currently running on a supply chain of rare minerals owned by our biggest rivals.
69% of the total of the volume mined out of the ground, the oxides, comes from China. Most of the rare earths are then turned into products in China, actually 91% of global supplies.
But the real shocker is the solution. A century of toxic waste is being transformed into the ultimate weapon, and China wasn't ready for this. The invisible red line. January in New York City usually comes with freezing winds and crowded subways. But the first few weeks of 2026 felt different. While most people were just trying to stay warm, the U.S. Secret Service was uncovering a massive illegal network of electronic devices hidden all over the city. This wasn't just some small-scale scheme. We're talking about over 300 high-tech servers and an astonishing 100,000 SIM cards hidden all over the city. Investigators discovered that the whole setup was designed for one purpose: to bring the city's lifeline to a halt. It had the ability to take down cell towers, block emergency 911 calls, and basically turn the world's most connected city on Earth into an isolated place. The timing of this discovery was no accident. It came just as global tensions were reaching a breaking point. Finding out that someone could shut down communication and leave millions of Americans unable to call for help or even send a simple text sent shockwaves through Washington. It made everyone realize that our everyday life is a lot more fragile than we would like to admit. Our phones and our internet are not just for scrolling through social media. They're also lifelines we often take for granted. And when these lifelines get targeted by foreign-linked schemes, it stops being just about tech and turns into a matter of survival. As if the news from New York wasn't enough to keep everyone up at night, the Pentagon dropped another bombshell on January 12th. New satellite images revealed that China has been very busy at a place called Pingtong in the Sichuan province. For years, the official story was that the site was just a small, basic nuclear facility. But the pictures tell a very different story. The site has been completely renovated and expanded. We are looking at a major upgrade to their nuclear warhead assembly lines. This isn't just a simple renovation for an old building, but a massive expansion that suggests a move toward a much more aggressive military approach, completely contradicting the idea of a minimal defense. When you put these two events together, the picture gets pretty clear and very scary. On one hand, you have a plot to sabotage the infrastructure inside our own borders. On the other, you have a rapid nuclear buildup happening halfway across the world. This brings us to a huge problem that most people never think about. We call it America's mineral soft underbelly. To build the high-tech shields, the advanced missiles, and even the secure cell towers we need to protect ourselves, we need specific materials. We need rare earth elements. These are the tiny ingredients that make modern technology work. Without them, our most advanced fighter jets are basically just expensive kites. The real shocker is that right now, we don't control the supply chain for these minerals. We have been relying on the very people who are expanding their nuclear sites and targeting our cell towers to sell us the materials we need to defend ourselves. It is a cycle that makes no sense. If a conflict ever broke out, those supplies would instantly disappear. We would be left with all the blueprints for defense, but none of the actual materials to build them. This realization has forced a massive shift in how the government looks at the American landscape. We had to stop looking for solutions in trade deals and start looking for them under our own feet. For years, We thought those old, run-down industrial towns on the East Coast, the once bustling centers for steel mills, coal mines, and manufacturing as a thing of the past. But as the threats grew closer and the global situation became more urgent, the search for a homegrown defense led us to a place nobody expected. It turns out, the key to our future was hidden in the toxic leftovers of our past. Right beneath our feet, what looked like industrial waste was actually a treasure stash of the very minerals we needed all along. To understand why the world is on edge, you have to think about it in a way most people wouldn't. Hidden somewhere inside your smartphone, the motor of an electric car and the guidance system of a missile is a tiny pinch of powder that makes the whole thing work. These are rare earth elements. While they aren't actually that rare in the ground, they are incredibly hard to separate and clean. For the last 30 years, China has been playing a very long game. They didn't just focus on mining these minerals, they built a stronghold around the factories that refine them. Today, they control about 90% of the world's refining capacity. So even if you find these minerals somewhere else, you usually have to send them to China to be processed and made usable. This gives Beijing a level of control that is hard to comprehend. Imagine a world where everyone has a car, but only one person owns all the gas stations. If that person gets angry, the whole world stops moving. By early 2026, this control turned into a chess match between Washington and Beijing. The US realized that its entire high-tech military and its green energy future were basically on a leash held by its biggest rival. Every time tensions flared up, that leash got a little tighter. The tipping point came on January 13, 2026, when President Trump surprised global markets with the Iran tariff gambit. He sent out a straightforward message. Any country trading with Iran would face a 25% tariff on all their goods sold to the US. But this move wasn't just about Iran. It had much bigger implications. It was a direct hit at China, which imports nearly 90% of Iranian oil. This move effectively shattered the one-year trade truce that both sides had been trying to maintain. It was a huge escalation that flipped the whole game overnight. The idea of slowly moving away from relying on foreign minerals vanished. Suddenly, it was now or never for the American industry. Experts warned we'd stirred up a hornet's nest without any protection. Without a trade truce, there was nothing stopping China from using its biggest weapon. And that's exactly what they did. Beijing didn't waste time. They started using a complex system of export permits to choke off the technology we rely on most. They didn't just block exports outright. They also made the paperwork so complicated and slow that shipments ended up stuck in ports for weeks or even months. They enforced a one batch, one license rule, which meant every single box leaving China needed a special signature from a top official. For Western tech companies, this was a nightmare. They couldn't plan production or guarantee when their products would be ready. It was a legal way to cut off the West from the crucial parts needed for fighter jets, satellites, and even the tiny magnets inside your computer's hard drive. China Move was meant to send a clear message to Washington. Without the factories to process our own minerals, the US wouldn't last in a full-blown trade war and would have to back down on the tariffs. It seemed like a checkmate. But what they didn't see was that the prior announcement made in January had already sparked something new. The old trade truce is dead and now replaced by a race to build supply chains that don't rely on crossing oceans. The alchemist's gambit. If you walk along the old hiking trails of West Virginia or Pennsylvania, you might stumble upon a creek that looks like it belongs on another planet. The water isn't clear or blue. Instead, it is a bright neon orange. To a hiker, it would look like a hopeless environmental disaster. This orange sludge is called acid mine drainage, and for nearly a century, we treated it as a toxic burden. But in early 2026, our view of this poison changed forever. It turns out that while we were busy worrying about the pollution, the Earth was actually doing our most difficult work for us. To really get why this orange water matters, you need to understand what's happening deep underground. When an old coal mine is abandoned, it's not just an empty hole, it's filled with rocks that have sulfur in them. When rainwater and oxygen seep into those tunnels, they react with the sulfur to form sulfuric acid. This acid acts like a strong, natural cleaner. As it moves through the rocks, it breaks down and pulls out the minerals hidden inside the earth. In an unexpected twist, the very pollution that damaged these streams was actually doing the hard work of pre-mining the world's most valuable elements and bringing them to the surface in liquid form. For a long time, the challenge wasn't finding these minerals in the water, but figuring out how to extract them efficiently. Traditional methods were slow and left too much behind. But everything changed on January 8, 2026, when researchers at Northeastern University announced a major breakthrough. Led by Professor Damilola Daramola and PhD student Lawrence Ajayi, the team discovered that using specialized microwave reactors could actually double or even triple the amount of rare earths we can pull from mining waste. Instead of focusing on the fly ash from burned coal like most people, this team turned their attention to coal tailings, the huge piles of leftover soil and rock scattered across the country. Their approach is kind of like a high-tech cooking recipe. First, they soak the coal tailings in a water and sodium hydroxide solution, which is basically lye. Then, they treat the material with nitric acid while heating it in a special microwave reactor. This isn't your regular kitchen microwave. It's designed to precisely heat and change the solid structure of the coal waste. By shaking up the molecules on a microscopic level, it breaks open the tough mineral shells that usually trap the rare earth elements inside, making it 2 to 3 times easier to extract them than ever before. This microwave method is a breakthrough because it focuses on 2 key minerals you might not know: neodymium and dysprosium. These elements are the secret behind the super-strong magnets found in everything from electric car motors to the guidance systems in advanced weapons. Neodymium gives the magnets their power, while dysprosium helps them keep working even at high temperatures. Without these minerals, much of today's technology would simply stop working. The way they pull these minerals out of the water is actually pretty clever. After the microwave reactor finishes its job, the liquid goes through a process called precipitation. It's kind of like a simple science experiment you might do in middle school. By carefully adjusting the acidity of the water, the dissolved minerals start to come out of the solution. They change from invisible ions into solid flakes that settle at the bottom, looking like a heavy, metallic snow. First, they remove the common stuff like iron and aluminum. That's the orange sludge. And then, in a second step, they collect a concentrated rare earth cake, packed with the valuable minerals we really need. This discovery has completely changed the story for the American Rust Belt. For years, people said these states' best days were behind them, and all they had left were polluted rivers. Now, those very rivers are seen as a valuable resource. We're not only cleaning up the environment, but also tapping into something even more valuable than coal ever was. It's a win-win that almost feels too good to be true. Healing the land while strengthening our national defense at the same time. It's an ironic situation because we spent billions of dollars trying to figure out how to stop this acidic water from flowing, thinking it was our biggest liability. Now, we realize it is our greatest asset. The very thing that made these mines a disaster is the reason the U.S. might finally win the mineral war. We have stopped looking for a way to hide our mistakes and started looking for a way to use them. This isn't mining like it used to be. No more digging huge holes or crushing tons of rock. It's a high-tech comeback. We're taking a century's worth of industrial pollution and turning it into the powerful core of a quantum computer. As the trade war heats up, people are realizing the US isn't just responding with tariffs. We're fighting back with chemistry that transforms our biggest wounds into our strongest defenses. By mid-January 2026, the tech world was preparing for a complete shutdown between the two biggest economies. Then, on January 13th, something happened that left experts confused. The Trump administration did the unexpected. They officially lifted a year-long ban and approved the export of NVIDIA's powerful H200 AI chips to China. At first, it seemed like Washington was giving up its biggest advantage, just as the trade war was intensifying. These chips are the high-powered fuel behind artificial intelligence, so handing them over to a rival felt like a major shift. But this wasn't a simple surrender. The green light came with a set of conditions that some experts are calling a clever move in geopolitical strategy. First, there was the Trump surcharge, a 25% tariff on every chip sold to China.
Somebody said, well, what would you do? What can you do? So easy. I'd drop a 25% tax on China.
That means for every chip NVIDIA ships across the Pacific, a hefty fee goes straight to the U.S. Treasury. In effect, the U.S. turned China's tech ambitions into a source of federal revenue. On top of that, strict limits were put in place to keep the U.S. ahead. The administration set a 50% cap on the volume, meaning NVIDIA can't sell more H200 chips to China than it sells within the U.S. This keeps control firmly in American hands. This rule ensures that the American compute pool remains larger and more powerful than China's. This was followed by an unusually strict requirement: mandatory U.S. routing. Every chip bound for China must first be sent to a lab in the United States for third-party testing. This guarantees that the hardware isn't tampered with or altered before it reaches its final destination. America felt confident in this approach because of the one generation behind rule. While the H200 chips are very fast, they're no longer the latest model. The U.S. kept its most advanced Blackwell and Rubin designs completely off-limits. By the time China gets the H200s up and running, American companies will already be using the next generation. It was a strategic decision to let China have the older tech, while the U.S. held on to the new tech. Soon after, the situation took a different turn. Just a day after the U.S. gave the green light, things took a sharp turn. Instead of welcoming the chips, Chinese customs started blocking the H200 shipments from entering the country. The Chinese government called in major tech players like Alibaba and ByteDance with a message: don't buy these American chips unless absolutely necessary. China realized that by purchasing the H200, they were basically handing over money to the Trump administration and funding their rival's government. They chose to rely on their own domestic chips, like Huawei's Ascend series, rather than pay this tax. This led to a strange deadlock we're still seeing today. The US is ready to sell the chips at a high price, but China refuses to buy, wanting to protect their own industry and their pride. While the world was focused on the high-tech battle over chips and software, America quietly shifted its attention to another critical area: the raw materials needed to build tomorrow's technology. That brings us back to those orange-stained creeks and coal waste piles in Appalachia. America's bold move with NVIDIA wasn't random.
NVIDIA today clearing the last U.S. government hurdle to export those H200s to China. But has the chip maker's moment there already passed? Our Deirdre Bosa talks about that in today's Tech Check.
They had already cracked the mineral monopoly. They weren't worried about a mineral blockade anymore because they had discovered a hidden treasure of liquid gold right at home. While everyone was busy freaking out about the chip fight, the real deal was the U.S. quietly locking down the key ingredients to neutralize China's mineral advantage. For a long time, the big players in the mineral world thought they had the US right where they wanted. In Beijing and other major capitals, the thinking was simple. America was too slow, too bogged down in its own rules, and way behind to catch up. They looked at how mining usually works in the West and saw a process that drags on forever. Opening a new mine in the US often means dealing with 10 years of paperwork, endless court battles and protests from local communities. Our rivals figured we were stuck in a trap we made ourselves, decades away from true independence. That was the big mistake they made. While everyone waited for the US to start digging new mines the old-fashioned way, they totally missed what was going on with the water and the waste. When you pull rare earths from coal waste or acid mine drainage, you skip the hardest part of mining. No need to blast through solid rock or build huge new sites. The materials are already there, on the surface, crushed, and in the case of that orange water, already dissolved and ready to be collected. This gives the US a speed boost no one expected. Because this method actually cleans up the environment instead of damaging it, it doesn't get stuck behind the same strict regulations that slow down traditional mining. Instead of clashing with neighbors and environmental groups, these projects are welcomed with open arms. They turn a community's biggest problem into its biggest source of income. That means the US can move from a lab discovery to full production way faster. We're not talking decades anymore. It's down to months or a few years. The economic turnaround here is almost unbelievable. For more than 50 years, the abandoned coal mines in Appalachia were seen as a $100 billion problem. The estimated cost just to keep the toxic water from polluting local rivers forever. It was a huge drain on the economy and a constant worry for the people living there. But once we figured out how to extract rare earths from that waste, what was once a liability turned into a trillion-dollar strategic asset, a way to create massive wealth from what used to be trash. It's like discovering that the old pile of junk in your garage is actually solid gold. For the people in these small coal towns, this is a second chance. Towns that were fading away as coal declined are now stepping into the spotlight of the global tech race. They're no longer left behind. They've become the new front line of American independence. Our rivals missed this because they were looking at the wrong place. They focused on digging deep underground, while we looked at what's right on the surface. They thought our environmental rules would hold us back, but those same rules pushed us to find a cleaner, faster, and smarter way to win. It's a classic example of underestimating someone because you expect them to play by the old rules. We've transformed our greatest weakness into a protective shield for our technology and military strength. The world saw us as stuck, waiting for permission to move forward, held back by regulations. What they failed to realize is that we were sitting on a liquid gold mine all along. The Heartland's Revenge. For generations, towns across Pennsylvania and West Virginia were built around coal. For the people who lived there, it wasn't just a job, it was who they were. When the mines shut down, the paychecks disappeared. It also left behind rusted machines and those orange acidic streams we've been talking about. The people felt like the world had moved on without them, leaving only the mess behind. For years, the story of the American heartland was one of loss and forgotten dreams. Everything shifted when the first mineral recovery plants started opening up. Suddenly, the skills that families had passed down for generations were in high demand again. If you talk to someone from these towns today, you'll notice a change in pride. A worker who once spent their days underground as a coal miner is now learning new skills as a mineral technician. They're not digging for fuel anymore. They're using advanced chemical sensors and microwave reactors to harvest what's next. This is the ultimate redemption story. There's an irony in the fact that coal's legacy is now helping save our green future. For years, environmentalists and industrial workers were on opposite sides, one fighting to protect the planet, the other to protect their jobs. Now, those two goals are finally coming together. We need the rare earth elements found in coal waste to build wind turbines and electric car batteries that will help clean the air.
However, other lithium mines in our state have faced a backlash legally as they sought to begin operations. Now, lithium is a key mineral in the production of electric car batteries, and we've got this map which shows the global lithium resources.
Without the old coal industry's legacy, we wouldn't have the materials to push toward a cleaner future. The past is literally funding what's ahead. The impact of this discovery is already spreading beyond the U.S. By showing we can pull these minerals from waste, we're setting an example that the rest of the world wants to follow. Countries in Europe and South America, dealing with their own industrial damage, are looking to Appalachia as a success story. We're no longer just sending out coal. We're sharing the technology to clean up the planet while strengthening our global partnerships. It turns out that working toward shared environmental goals is a powerful way to build strong diplomatic ties. As these mineral plants grow, the landscape itself is starting to change. Those bright orange creeks in these areas that once served as a warning are finally beginning to clear up. You can actually see life coming back to the water as the acid and heavy metals are removed and put to use in our technology. For the families nearby, it's a sign that things are improving. They're not just finding new jobs, they're witnessing their home being restored. The long-standing feeling of hopelessness in these towns is giving way to a new sense of confidence. This is what sovereignty looks like in real life. It's not just about big speeches in Washington or trade deals in Beijing. It's about a father in West Virginia knowing his kids have a future right there in their hometown. It's about a whole region showing they're not a burden, but a force to be reckoned with. The orange creeks are finally clearing up. As the poison leaves the water, power comes back to the people. While the change in Appalachia feels like a local win, its true power is how it's shifting the rules for the whole world. For years, the global mineral market was a one-way street to China. But by January 2026, the success of mining minerals from American coal waste had sparked a chain reaction. Now, a new kind of mineral diplomacy is emerging. The U.S. has started key agreements with allies like Australia and Canada to share this microwave extraction technology. Instead of every country fighting over a shrinking supply, we're helping allies find their own liquid gold in their own waste. This move has effectively created a mineral shield for the West. By sharing the technology, the U.S. ensures that even if one supply chain is blocked, there are 5 others ready to take its place. Australia, for instance, has massive piles of mining tailings that were once seen as a burden, but are now being looked at as a strategic reserve for the entire Indo-Pacific region. This isn't just about making money. It is about making sure that no single country can ever use minerals as a weapon to bully another nation again. For the average person, this means the high-tech world we enjoy is finally getting a stable foundation. We are moving away from a grab-what-you-can mentality to a clean-what-you-have strategy. It turns out that the secret to global stability wasn't found in a new trade deal or having a massive army. It was found in the ability to turn our common industrial problems into a shared solution. By cleaning up the land, we're not just healing the environment. We're creating a world where power is shared and spread among friends. The orange creeks in the heartland were just the start of a story that's now reaching across the globe. Looking back at the start of the year, everything finally fell into place. We began with warning signs pointing to a future full of risks. From the secret servers found in New York to the huge nuclear buildup in Sichuan, the message was clear. America stood at a turning point. We could either keep depending on a global supply chain being used against us, or find a way to stand strong on our own. However, the clock is ticking on this environmental turnaround. While groups like the Friends of Decker's Creek have turned miles of orange water clear again, and the new $26 million Blacklick Creek facility in Pennsylvania is working to restore 25 miles of waterway, the battle is shifting. Up in the Arctic, over 75 remote rivers are actually turning bright orange for the first time as thawing permafrost releases minerals naturally. Back home, recent moves in the House this year have seen efforts to roll back $500 million in cleanup funding, a reminder that the progress we've made remains fragile and far from guaranteed. We've shifted from playing defense to taking the offensive, but the battle is far from over. By transforming an environmental disaster into a strategic asset, we've rewritten the story of American industry. The red line of 2026 wasn't the beginning of a downfall. It was the moment we chose to turn our wounds into our greatest strength. At last, we've understood that true sovereignty isn't just about what we build or produce. It's about how we restore and heal the damage we've caused along the way. By harvesting our past, we've secured our future. The toxic legacy of coal is now the shield of American innovation. The world wasn't ready for a superpower that could turn its scars into strength. But the heartland was. Do you think China will eventually give in and buy our taxed NVIDIA chip? Or are we about to witness the rise of a completely separate Chinese tech ecosystem? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, click on the next video on your screen. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.